Have you been wanting to try flying in Kerbal Space Program 2 using your joystick but you don't know how? Well, here's a quick guide for setting up any joystick in either game. To get started, you'll need to download a couple of pieces of software. That's vJoy, Joystick Gremlin, and if you're playing in KSP 2 you'll need the mod Input Binder. Once you've got those first two installed, we're going to start by setting up vJoy. Okay, so once you've got vJoy open, if you look at the axis on the left, if you're not sure which ones apply to your stick, just leave them all enabled. The main thing we're going to focus on here in the middle is number of buttons. So I know that my stick has 39, so I'm just going to type that in here. If you're not sure how many buttons you need for your stick, you can open up Joystick Gremlin, select the right device at the top, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll see the number of buttons and any POVs marked there as hats. Don't worry too much about this, you can always put in far more than you need. It's the same with the POVs here. I've got one, but if you're not sure, just add the maximum number, you should be absolutely fine. And then here on the right is where you'd apply anything to do with force feedback. If you're not sure whether your stick has it or not, just leave it blank. Once you're done, you can hit apply down here. And then that's vJoy all configured, so we're just going to check it's enabled in the bottom left, and then we're good to quit out. We don't need to open that again. And then you can go ahead and open up Joystick Gremlin. You should see along the top here all the devices plugged into your PC, all the sticks and any vJoy devices that we've configured. So yeah, we're able to select each device just by clicking on the tabs here. Before we start mapping things, let's go to Tools and then Options, and I'll show you some settings that will help out. So make sure that Highlight Currently Used Input is enabled. That will allow you to track down which button and which axis you're moving and make it easier to map. And I just like to make sure that my profile is active on launch and that Joystick Gremlin starts minimized, so when we open the software in future it will already be enabled and we'll be good to go. Okay, so we're now ready to start mapping our buttons and axis. Check that you've got one selected, head over here, and where it says map to keyboard, just swap that to remap and then add. You should see that it autofills with vJoy device 1 and the correct axis already selected. So just double check that it is the correct one, and then you can move on to the next, which is the y-axis, and then you're just going to do that for every single axis on the stick, either going down one by one or by moving the stick physically and seeing which ones highlight. And then once you get down to the buttons here, you can do exactly the same thing, but you're going to add the map to keyboard option. This will make each button on your stick mimic an actual keyboard press. So what I would do is press each button on your stick, decide what you want it to be, add the map to keyboard option, and then just go ahead in here and detect that key. So for example, the first one I've got was the trigger on my joystick. I've mapped that to the spacebar, which in Kerbal will do the staging. I think the next one was my missile button, which I've turned into the abort. And then you're just going to go down one by one, detecting each button on the joystick and remapping your desired key to it. Once you get done with all the buttons here, at the very bottom you should see any of your POVs, any of your hats that you also need to remap. They're the same as the axis. Once you add that remap, it should autofill with the correct device. So once you're done mapping everything you need, make sure to save your profile, file save as, give it a convenient name. And then one last step, we just need to make sure we turn on the profile by hitting the little controller here. Should go green, that means that it's running, and you can quickly test the buttons by typing using your joystick, check that the right letters are appearing, and then you know you're good to go. Then it's time to minimize Joystick Gremlin and we can go ahead and open up KSP. So if you're going to be using this for Kerbal Space Program 1, you just got to open the game, go into settings, go into input, and then on the right here across the tabs, just go ahead and map pitch, yaw and roll. So for example, pitch, I'm just pulling back on the stick, and then I'll do the same for the other two, and I'll do the same in the vessel tab as well, just to make sure that it works in all aspects of the game. And then that's it, you're good to go. The main thing to remember is we don't need to touch any of the keys, any of the buttons, because we've mapped them already to their equivalent on the keyboard, so that's all sorted. And then if you're going to be using this for Kerbal Space Program 2, you're going to need to install a mod. So I'm using CKAN here. I've got a new instance for my Kerbal Space Program 2 save. I'm going to select that. And then the mod that we're going to install is called Input Binder, should be further down here. You can also type it in the search bar if you can't find it. I think it has one dependency. Once those are installed, we can jump over into Kerbal Space Program 2 and do the final setup. Once you've got KSP2 open, just load up a save, spawn in a vehicle on the runway, something we can use to configure the stick and just make sure that everything's working. Then I like to just go ahead and put the brake on while we're doing these last steps so our vehicle doesn't roll away. And if you look down in the bottom right here on the UI, you should see these 9 little tiles. If you click on that, it should open a menu and Input Binder should be visible if it's installed correctly. Then once you click on it, it should open its own little UI here, and then we're going to go through and do the same as we did with the other mapping software. We're just going to click on the axis we want to remap, make sure to apply the correct axis. So the first one at the top we'll do pitch. You're going to hit rebind, and then if you move your joystick in the right direction, it should detect it, and you just go through one by one until you've mapped everything. So it should be pitch, yaw, roll, and probably your throttle as well, but there may be others. And then if you've got any axis like this one that needs inverting, you can add a processor down here. Just hit add and then invert, and that will just flip the direction around. Once you save that, it should fix it. The only other little thing to do maybe is if any of your axes are quite sensitive, it might just be worth sticking a dead zone on there. So you can do the same, go to the axis and add processor dead zone. I think on my main profile I just added the dead zone of 0.1 or 0.15 to almost every axis, and that kept things only being detected when I was moving them. So once you've got everything mapped and it seems to be working correctly, just make sure to save your profile, make it your default so that it will auto load. And with that last step taken care of, you can close the mod. You should now be all ready and set up. So yeah, go and have a test flight, see how you get on. Any little tweaks you want to make, you can do in flight. Yeah, hope that all has worked out for you, and happy flying.